my name is Pascal. Today we are going to do a buy guide on the Rogue RM4 Fortis. If you want more information, then please follow the links in the description box below or check out my other YouTube lists here where I go through all of the material from Rogue that I have here in my home gym. The main question you have to ask yourself for the RM4 is how modular actually do you want your rack to be. The Rogue RM4 Fortis is welded together, and that is the main difference to the regular RM4. That brings cost savings with it. So if you want to enter the Monster series really cheap, that is probably one of the best options you have. But that comes at the cost of that your rack will be harder to transport and get into different positions in your home gym, and it will also be harder to build on because you won't be able to take it apart as much. If you are still on the fence before getting Rogue equipment, then let me assure you why you should buy Rogue in my personal opinion. They are the best in the market for quality, they have the best customer service, they also produce locally in the US and employ people locally, and they keep constantly innovating. For all of these boxes being ticks, I gladly pay a premium. Yes, there was a bit of a dip in quality during the pandemic because Rogue was hit by tremendous growth because there was a boom within the home gym equipment industry, and at the same time they had problems hiring new staff to keep up with the growth. So that is why some things, especially on delivery, got a bit muddled up. But whenever that happened, and I have multiple examples here on my channel, then Rogue owned up to it if it was an honest mistake. The only thing they didn't do was take responsibility for poor delivery by the carriers that they chose, because that is something they couldn't control. And as a CEO, you shouldn't take responsibility for something that you can't control. So I completely understand Bill Henniger's indecision on that one to say if it was a delivery problem, your stuff got dumped somewhere or didn't even arrive at your doorstep, then please contact UPS, FedEx, or someone else who carried our produce. But whenever it was a product failure or a wrong delivery because it was packed wrong on the pallet, it was remedied swiftly by Rogue as far as I know. To understand the design of the Rogue RM4 Fortis a bit better, I'm zooming out and showing you my RM4 here. So what you're seeing here is that on both ends I have nuts and bolts, and that repeats at the back and also at the bottom. So that means that I can actually take apart the 4 uprights and also the top cross members and the lower cross members, which gives me more options to transport the rack, but also to upgrade in future if I wanted to basically play Lego with Rogue parts. That option will be taken from you when you buy the RM4 Fortis, because the Fortis is welded together, so therefore it is not as modular as a regular RM4. So if you don't want to transport your rack as much, and if you don't have to get through different kind of narrow passages, then that's fine, especially if you buy for a home gym in a garage where you just put it up once and that's it. I'm intending to upgrade at some stage, so that's why I've chose the RM4. But otherwise, have a look at the pictures of the RM4, and then you will see where there's not nuts and bolts but welds, and then you will understand how the cages will actually be installed together and why they're a bit more bulky than the parts that come with an RM4 that are just a little bit more modular. When we are talking RM4 Fortis, we also should visit whether you buy a 4-post or a 6-post rack. So I think the American dream leads you to maybe to oversize things and think as a 6-post rack first. At least that's what happened to me, and that is also what I observe on many other channels who are buying from Rogue. Personally, I think that the 4-post rack is more than enough, and maybe even a half rack instead of a full rack, depending on how much space you have. Because one of the strongest gyms ever to have been is the West Side Gym by Louis Simmons. This is also the grandfather of all Rogue rack designs, and that is actually a half rack, or the R3, RM3 in terms of dimensions. So if these massive powerlifters can work with half racks and with 4-post racks, I would question whether everybody at home really does need a 6-post rack. As we touched on 4-post for the 6-post racks for the RM4, the next thing to go over is whether you should buy an RM4 or an RM3 or an R4 or an R3, you know, or the Fortis version. So for the Fortis version, it's welded. Now for the decision between RM4 and R3, it's basically about the space. And if you want to get an idea of dimensions, I'm personally 185 centimeters tall. I weigh 100 kg. So I am a heavyweight for powerlifting. I would be also a heavyweight in most martial arts. And as you can see, I have plenty of space here in this frame. And if you want to see it from different angles in action, then also consider to look at my training for the Jersey playlist. There you see me bench pressing and squatting heavy. The only thing that I might not recommend in a half rack is storing the plates on the rack and wanting to deadlift inside the rack. If you combine those two, then you probably won't get a lot of fun out of that, to put it mildly. I also had one injury using this rack, because in my old house I actually had to pull deadlifts inside the rack, and sometimes I would touch off the plates if I didn't take care when I put the very heavy weights up or down. And then I just had a little shift while deadlifting 180 kg. So that ain't great. However, that was entirely my own fault, because if I had set up the deadlift more at the front of the RM4, I would have had no problem whatsoever. But bringing it back to an R3 or an RM3 and the plates on the bottom of the rack stored, then deadlifting inside probably isn't the greatest idea. But apart from that, an RM4 has more than enough space. As you can see, you don't need an RM6 because you are afraid that when you store the plates on the uprights, that you won't have enough space to do whatever you want to do. Next thing to talk about are safeties, and what you see here behind me are actually the flip down safeties from rack. Now can be used for the RM4, but you can't buy them on the checkout. If you want them to get as cheap as possible, get an RM4 rack, because when you get an RM4 rack, the flip down safeties actually come at 160 or 180 bucks. And if you buy them separately, they're actually around 400-ish. I think that's a mistake by Rogue. So if they spot it and they fixed it by the time you see this video, don't scalp me. But talking safeties in general, I personally think you should stick with the pin and pipe safeties or with the flip down safeties and not really go for the straps. That is just personal taste. So all of these options are safe, but I personally don't like the straps for the type of training that I do. I do pin deadlifts, I do some pin bench presses, I do pin squats, sometimes I do rack pulls, and I think straps just behave really, really weird for that type of training. The only thing that I can personally say in favor of straps is that they're more gentle on your barbell. So if you're in love with your barbell, then fair enough. Get the straps, because it will leave less kind of friction on it. And also the last thing against straps is that they can be easily stolen if you get them in a commercial setting, because you can just wrap them up and throw them into the gym bag and then they're gone. So not a huge fan of straps. I know there are also a lot of people who out there who like them a lot, but for the type of training that I'm doing and for other reasons, I would always recommend the pin and pipes and the flip down safeties. The flip down safeties also have the advantage that they come in from the side rather than having to be fed from the front. Feeding the safeties from the front can be a pain, especially if you want to do it quick. And also you might not even have all of the space in front of the rack to get basically the same depth that you have for the rack in front of it, so that you then also can conveniently feed the pin and pipes in. Now I have a dedicated review of the flip down safeties if you want to get deeper into it, but just for buying an RM4 you now are more than enough on safeties. Another debate to be had about Rogue racks is whether you should get Monster or Monster Light. Now with the RM4 Fortis you would get a Monster rack and the big nuts and bolts. You would get also the numbering on the uprights that you can see here. And you will also enter the product line of Rogues that Rogue currently pays the most attention to when it comes to innovation. All of the other product lines from Rogue, which are Echo, Infinity, Monster Light, will get the trickle down from the inventions from the Monster depending on how good the sales are. So if you always want the latest and greatest from Rogue, yes, also at the premium price, that is undebatable, then you go with Monster. The Monster Lights now also come with numbered uprights for an extra $100, which I would always recommend to get if you decide to go for Monster Light. And you can then also have the advantage of west side spacing. West side spacing means that you actually have the holes closer together in the benching areas. And that is really, really good if you work a lot with bands and if you intend to power lift with equipment, because then you can work with the west side method more because you have more variation in the range of motion of the bench press itself, or also for that matter for deadlift pins, pin deadlifts, all of that nice stuff. Personally, I'd say go with Monster. That will protect your investment. Monster also has a good resale value when it's sold, because a lot of people are just after it because it's the gold standard at the moment. So you won't lose a lot of value when you resell. But that is just me. I'm a bit crazy about my equipment anyway, and I also want to upgrade to a Rhino belt squat at some stage and the lat pull down once they're available in Europe. They're currently not. That's not everyone. So if you don't really want to upgrade and you just want to get a rack and be done with it, the R6 is quite a good option, I think, where you get everything in one box. And the R4 and R3 are also solid. But the RM4 is also great if you want to enter the Monster series at a discount, because the different parts are actually welded together more and not all jointed together with nuts and bolts. To tie this all together when you're checking out, I think you should definitely accessorize a little. So when you put your RM4 Fortis into your basket, don't forget to also get some storage pins, which you see behind me. Get the long storage pins, don't bother with the short storage pins, and 4 storage pins are more than enough. You don't need the 6 that are often advertised on the marketing pictures from Rogue, because I have the Rogue black training plates here, and I can probably store up to 500 kg on that rack using red plates. So that's more than enough for most people, unless your name is Eddie Hall or Hafthor Bjornsson or Jamal. But apart from that, most people will have more than enough to play with 300 kg. Another accessory that I would highly recommend is to get a Landmine and maybe a second barbell, rather than the lever arms. I've also discussed this at length on this channel, but basically with the barbell and the Landmine you end up about at the same price than with the lever arms, and you just have so many more options because the Landmine moves in more directions. Of course, the lever arms are cool and they're great, and if you have an unlimited budget, please get them because they're a great toy. But if you don't, and if you want to make things stretch, you get more out of a second barbell and Landmine than just the lever arms, in my personal opinion.